Hey, what is up, everybody? How goes it? What's everybody doing today? Well, hey, guess what, man? It is Thursday. Man, it's gonna be a fun day today. Man, that's right. Lincoln, you there?
I'm right here, everybody. Don't freak out or miss nothing that hasn't been missed or anything like that. I am here, my friends. I am here. It's going to be a great day, guys. Join us. Don't miss. You guys got to hear this. Einstein's brain was stolen. I didn't know that. I had no idea. I might have never said anything. I might have loved him some Einstein. All right, take it away. You guys, it's going to be fun as heck today. I'm still straight as an arrow. Not cussing for me. No way.
Well, thank you, Link. Man, did you guys ever hear about Einstein's brain? Oh boy. When after he passed away. This is a story you don't want to miss, man. No, you just don't want to miss. Hey, 4Q, what is up? How you doing? Yeah, I'm not real sure that I was too familiar with this whole espionage story that we got going on here, but, apparently. Oh, man. Oh, but, have anybody heard the strange story of Einstein's brain? The outrageous, man. I'm sounding like, man, if anybody's heard of this, yeah, feel free to call in. This is a pretty good one. Man, is money the ultimate drug for the mind? Right in the middle of it. Is money the ultimate drug for the criminal minds? You ask yourself and many others and more and more. You know what I'm going to do for a second? Because I just want to make sure. I'm pretty sure everybody can hear me. Or are some things just a lot more enticing? Well, perhaps the answer can be found by examining the bizarre case of the man who stole the brain of the world's smartest man, Albert Einstein. I know. Hey, I can't say that wouldn't be something that I mean, if you had Einstein's brain, it would be kind of like, holy shit, like I got the most amazing physicist brain, you know what I'm saying? I mean, Einstein was a cool dude. You know, he smokes like, I smoke like he does. He used to walk across the stages all the time, like with a pipe in his mouth, always smoking. He would be like in the middle of a conversation and be walking and pick up cigarette butts that still had, that still were like, you know, good snipes, and he'd empty the tobacco into his pipe. He thought that smoking eased the mind for just daily life or whatever. And man, funny, I've always thought and said that. I always said, if I quit smoking, everybody around me would seriously hate me because I turn into a really fun guy. I'm just going to leave it at that. Man, okay, so Princeton, New Jersey, April 18th, 1955. Albert Einstein, physicist, celebrated physicist at that. Considered to be the father of modern physics, he was, E equals MC squared. He dies at the age of 76. Now, while Einstein wishes to be cremated, Princeton's hospital chief of, pathologist Thomas Harvey was first to determine the cause of death. Now, as the body of Albert Einstein sat on the autopsy table, Harvey's interest was somewhere else. Probably like many others, I'm sure. I mean, who wouldn't? Or like anyone else. We wanted to find out what made Einstein basically tick. What made him so damn incredibly fucking brilliant without cussing. I told you. Don't cuss on here, Lincoln.
That was not even me, dude. Watch the story, yo.
Sorry. Yeah. And who wouldn't want to see how Einstein's brain ticked, you know? So he sees, he's like, wow, there's the source right there in front of me. I mean, the brain of Albert Einstein. Something about the brain of Albert Einstein, I'm sure, caught the interest of many with no signal, no sign of like any effort. Guy cut the skull and removed the brain. Refused it with formaldehyde. Put it in bottles. The next morning, New York Times reports Albert Einstein's brain has been removed for scientific study. The man Hardy believed somewhere within Einstein's brain was the secret to his genius. And, hey man, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't think it? You know what I'm saying? So he persuaded Einstein's son, which I think he had a son, and I think he had a. I'm not real. I don't want to. No, I don't want to start lying, or making false pretenses. But he persuaded Einstein's son to let him study his father's brain. Heinz Albert, I think was his name, and Einstein's executor they came to speak to Harvey about removing his brain and using it, keeping it for scientific purposes. He pressed upon the uniqueness and the technicality of looking at Einstein's brain as a way of approaching how people look at his intellect and his geniusness. I mean, and what made him tick. What was it that Einstein was so special about his brain that, well, there's a fine line between science and just straight. I don't know. Would you call that robbery? Or, I mean, I don't know. I mean, now at the same time, I get it, but I mean, imagine once you had Albert Einstein's brain, wouldn't it be like, whoa? Well, anyway, I mean, it is pretty morbid. But Harvey took dozens of photos of Einstein's brain. He dissected it, cultivated thin pieces for microscopic analogy and study. Years passed, though, and Harvey never published any papers. He never went back to the he never anything about what he found. He also never returned the brain and kept it for himself with absolutely no intention of ever giving it back. Once Thomas Harvey had the brain, he didn't let it out of his sight, though. I mean, like, he did not. He left his position as chief of the Princeton Hospital, heads out to the Midwest, and he went into general practicing. But the brain was always with him. He carried it everywhere with him, in two large glass jars and formaldehyde, in cardboard boxes. Carried it everywhere. And there's been a historical trend of examining the brain. Everybody, who doesn't, like I said, who doesn't want to examine Einstein's brain? And a lot of the examining that people want to know about is the gray matter of the geniuses and to figure out what it was about his brain that was so amazing. For instance, the Brain Institute in Moscow, they kept the brain, I guess, of these dictatorships, Vladimir Lenin, and around 200 Russian scientists. This brain was just stayed on a dusty shelf, and for years they did, and then hoping that they would, I don't know, figure out one day how to unlock the secret of his genius. And it's the same thing with Einstein's brain. But there's a, yeah, I mean, there's a fine line between science and, well, I don't know, grave robbery, but, man, he never did. I mean, if I were gonna do that though, I would figure out what it was about his brain. I mean, would you not? I would. I mean, now, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I don't think I'm the dumbest. I might be right after the dumbest, but I didn't think, whatever. But Harvey got a little more obsessed and a little bit more greedy, because not only did he swipe Einstein's brain, but it was basically a moment for him. I mean, like, how many people can say they have the brain of Albert Einstein? I know I keep saying it, but to have that on your shelf, I'm sure there's a little bit more than, like, maybe he thought somehow it would make him like Albert Einstein. I don't know, but you think the next of kin is his kiddos or someone would say something about it, but Harvey persuaded him away from his job, which determined the cause of death and then of a patient at Princeton Hospital, and he did it when he completed the autopsy. At that point, that's all everyone really knew. That was, I mean, that was it. And he didn't want to hand it back, and that's why he said, that's why he kept the brain. As a phlebotomist, he studied it. Cut little thin slices, and put it under microscope, and look at these, but then 2 decades of having it, 2 decades after the death of Albert Einstein, the rest of his body had been cremated, and his wife and children had passed away, and the world kind of had all but forgotten about it. I mean, I think they probably figured that they studied it, and they, whatever. I mean, nobody really said anything about it until, what was his name? It all changed in 1978 when he was a young guy, wrote a book. He was a reporter named Stephen Lenny. Tracked down the whereabouts of Einstein's brain for a magazine article that he had discovered that was Thomas Harvey's. It was a book he wrote about what happened to Einstein's brain, which brought everything back to the surface. Wait a minute. Harvey took his brain, but did he give it back? No, he didn't. No. Decades, 2 decades went by. And so everybody's kind of like, dude, it brought back the interest to what the hell was going on with Albert Einstein's brain. So the medical community, they were scratching their heads, and they were like, okay, he's got the brain in pieces, as it were. Let's have a closer look. What happened? I mean, what's the outcome? Well, as it turns out, when Harvey gave back the dissected pieces of the brain, scientists made a remarkable discovery. Now, and it was a discovery that could finally reveal the secret behind Einstein's brain. Now, conveniently enough, when he did steal the brain, because he put it in for a minute. I'll get back to you in just and so now, sorry, I hate when people get in the middle of my thing. So as it turns out, he had it in pieces. And the way he preserved it, though, they were able to use modern technology on his brain. I mean, because I don't think they had as much technology back then as they do, today. And so the way that it was preserved, they could use all today's technology, which Princeton, New Jersey, may have, I think, 2,000 neurologist Fred Lepore, I believe, was his name. He was given the rare opportunity to photograph the remains of Einstein's brain. The philopologist. I'm sorry, I never claimed to be smart. I just report the shit. There you go. And he brought out 2 jars containing little gauze-wrapped cubes, which were the remaining sections of the remains of Einstein's brain. Now, it's a very interesting and very provocative moment. I mean, how did that inadequate brain tissue of this world changing theories? I mean, God, Einstein, everybody knows how brilliant. It blows my mind. Honestly, well, no, it doesn't blow my mind. I mean, goddamn, who wouldn't? I'd be my first thing. I'd be like, holy shit, let's study his brain, see what happened. Well, and the process begins by looking at the anatomy and trying to see if it could give us some kind of answers to the question of why Einstein was such a profound genius and what made his brain tick. It's a question Thomas Harvey first asked in 1955, and one that made him want to steal Einstein's brain in hopes of getting an answer. He had the opportunity to meet with Thomas Harvey in spring, this young guy, 2000, and he had given up, that dream of, in every avenue. In 2007, Harvey died of a hemorrhage, ironically. And because, like I said, Harvey preserved it the way he did, they were able to look at his brain in modern technology, and they did, and discovered his brain of this visionary genius was, in fact, different than most people's brain. You guys want to hear what it was? Is anybody waiting? I'm just kidding. His brain had enlarged peridian lobe. In addition, instead of a lot of grooves in his brain, there was an enlarged, flattened kind of area that didn't have all those little lines and stuff. And so it looked really very, I'm sure imaginable, but it was the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe is the area of the brain that helps us with visual, spatial recognition and neural, what are they, oh God, synapses, that trigger in your brain. And the end result was the exceptional brain of Albert Einstein was due to the parietal lobe being autonomically different from the human norm. And that's the story of his brain. And man, maybe Harvey was just hanging on to that brain. Maybe it made him feel like he kind of was like in some sort of weird way, like his brain would rub off on. I don't know, man. I don't know. I guess just to say, hey, guys, I've got Albert Einstein's brain in a jar on my desk. You guys want to fucking see this? Don't cuss in here. I told you. Well, yeah. Isn't that funny though? You know what? I can't say I was real familiar with that story. But as to find out, I guess I was. Hey, Albert Einstein. Woo!
Man, I always knew that Mog had an awesome weird something about his brain. I really did. I knew there was something there. Honestly, I just knew it was familiar with me. Because I'm so smart. Oh my God! I'm not even sure I even get it anymore.
Hey, thank you, Lincoln. You know what?
And its
What?
dual nature as wave and a particle.
Oh, God. See, here he goes. Here he goes.
Today.
Thank you, Lincoln. See, here goes.
That is saying that light
Yeah.
is
See how
a
this
wave
is how
and
Lincoln
a
does his.
particle.
Yeah.
Have
His
you
Albert
ever
Einstein
heard
impression.
of the double slit experiment?
Yeah, Lincoln,
Oh,
we
it's
have.
amazing.
Oh, I know.
Okay. The
Tell me
double
about
slit
it.
experiment
Yeah.
says that
What's this?
light is
Yeah.
a particle and a wave.
Oh,
Light
man.
is a wave that only two particles
Sorry.
ever existed.
Wow. Well, thank you, Linky. Hey, everybody. Give him a hand or a paw. We love you, Lincoln. Boy, he went right back down and passed out. Well, I guess that was his highlight. Well, everybody, I got to take a short break. As always, I won't leave you too bored. I will be right back. Do not go anywhere. That's why that was so loud. I had my earphones. Has it been like real loud, or maybe not loud enough, or too loud? Maybe I had this down too much. I hope to God that this was all hearable. Man, my thing was up. That's why I was thinking it was so loud. Oh, shit. Dude. You know, I'm really sick of you cussing like that, Lincoln. It's just unprofessional, son.
Oh, yeah? I won't go tell you what you need to do with your mama.
I'll be right back.
I was so busy and preoccupied, hiking out in the woods that day. I can't believe that I had the encounter. He just thought it was some sort of demon coming for him. His father, also being a believer. You might say superstitious.
Don't go anywhere. I'll be back.
Whatever you want to call it. My grandfather told his father, my great-grandfather. They didn't waste any time. They got in the truck and they left. Before I go, another crazy story from my grandfather. When he was about 18, 19, or 20, it was in the fall, and he was tracking this really large buck. He came to this spot in the woods where he had good eyes on it, and as he got ready to make the shot, this large, Bigfoot-like creature comes out of nowhere, grabs the buck by the neck, twists and breaks its neck like it was a small bird, virtually effortlessly, then just grabs the buck by the back legs, throws it over its shoulder, and casually walks off. Scared my grandfather pretty badly too. He took off. My grandfather's tribe, the Choctaw people, have a name that they call these Bigfoot creatures, but forgive me, because I can't remember it at the moment. But he knows what he saw. He has also seen them growing up, so he knew what it was. I'll reach out to him and see if I can't get him to document or write down a bunch of his experiences and encounters. I think you would really appreciate them, and if anything, really enjoy them. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Have a wonderful day. I spoke with this witness on January 8th, 2006, for more than 40 minutes. This man and his wife were returning from a trip from Florence, Alabama. They were watching the sun set as they drove along the Trace Parkway in a generally southwestern direction. They had just crossed the Mississippi-Alabama state line and had traveled approximately 3 to 4 miles into Mississippi as they approached mile marker 307. The witness said that he saw what initially appeared to be a person jogging along the right side of the road in a southwestern direction. He emphasized that it's fairly common to see joggers along the trace, so he didn't think too much about it at first glance. The witness said that when approaching that mile marker, the road is hilly and there's a slight downhill incline at that point. At the bottom of the hill, the road curves to the right when traveling southwest on the trace. There was a vehicle approaching the opposite direction, and was just entering the witness's field of vision as he topped the hill just prior to mile marker 307. The vehicle traveling in the opposite direction had also just topped the hill as well. As both vehicles came into view of each other on tops of their respective hills, the animal appeared to panic. Both cars traveled down their hills, around the curve, and past each other. The witness slowed to nearly a stop, while the other car appeared to pass by without slowing at all. The animal was initially traveling at a normal speed for a jogger when he first noticed it, but then it suddenly began moving quickly and appeared to be running at about the speed a deer would sprint as both vehicles entered the curve. As it crossed the road from right to left, it lost its balance and tipped, nearly falling down. After catching its balance, it bounded off into the woods. It had its back towards the him until it turned across the road. The closest he came to it was roughly 25 to 30 yards, and it ran between the two cars, and roughly equal distance between the vehicles. He said it was solid black, and was even illuminated by the sun, which was still in the sky at this point. He said the entire observation lasted only a matter of seconds, and his full attention was focused on it for roughly 2. It happened so quickly that he didn't even have the time to say look to his wife, who was also in the car with him. He thinks the sighting took place with the bounds of Tishomingo State Park. He emphasized that he did not pay much attention to it until it panicked and began moving very quickly. He got a side profile of it as it crossed. He said its head did not look human and appeared to be a little raised in the back and appeared to slope towards the front. He described it as very stocky with a muscular build. When it tripped, it swung its arms out to catch its balance. He said the hands appeared to be much larger, proportionally than a human's, and the arms appearing to be longer, proportionally than a normal human arm. While the animal was running along the highway, the arms were up like a human, just like they would be when jogging. The surrounding terrain is steep hills and large boulders. Bear Creek even runs through here. An area adjacent to this location is called the Freedom Hills. It's called that because it was a favored hiding area for escaped slaves prior to the Civil War. It's very possible a large wild beast might be roaming through this area that resembles that of what they call a Bigfoot. My mother and I had taken my young Doberman to the Honey Island swamp to let him run and get some exercise. We had driven to the end of the road where the bridge had collapsed and you could not go any further back by car. The area is just a few miles from the Honey Island exit, off of Interstate 59 in Mississippi. The road was built up, about 8 feet from the ground, since it flooded back there. The area around the road was swampy, having lots of trees. The ground was covered in leaves, since it was fall. We had been there about 10 minutes, and my dog had pretty much been staying on the road as he ran around. I went to get something out of the car, and when I began walking back to where my mother was on the road, she was looking out into the wooded area at something. She pointed out what appeared to be something dark beside a large cypress tree. We could not make out a head, but it appeared to be gray and black, covered in fur, and was actually a torso. Whatever we were looking at was large. It stood above some bushes, and the top part was behind the branches of the tree. It had to have been well over 6 feet tall, since the bushes were at least 3 feet tall. It definitely was not another tree, because the texture was so different, and the big tree next to it looked different. It was approximately 1 p.m.
the...
Or 20. It was in the fall, and he was tracking this really large buck. He came to this spot in the woods where he had good eyes on it, and as he got ready to make the shot, this large, Bigfoot-like creature comes out of nowhere, grabs the buck by the neck, twists and breaks its neck like it was a small bird, virtually effortlessly, then just grabs the buck by the back legs, throws it over its shoulder, and casually walks off. Scared my grandfather pretty badly too. He took off. My grandfather's tribe, the Choctaw people, have a name that they call these Bigfoot creatures, but forgive me, because I can't remember it at the moment. But he knows what he saw. He has also seen them growing up, so he knew what it was. I'll reach out to him and see if I can't get him to document or write down a bunch of his experiences and encounters. I think he would really appreciate them, and if anything, really enjoy them. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Have a wonderful day. I spoke with this witness on January 8th, 2006, for more than 40 minutes. This man and his wife were returning from a trip from Florence, Alabama. They were watching the sun set as they drove along the Trace Parkway in a generally southwestern direction. They had just crossed the Mississippi-Alabama state line and had traveled approximately 3 to 4 miles into Mississippi as they approached mile marker 307. The witness said that he saw what initially appeared to be a person jogging along the right side of the road in a southwestern direction. He emphasized that it's fairly common to see joggers along the trace, so he didn't think too much about it at first glance. The witness said that when approaching that mile marker, the road is hilly and there's a slight downhill incline at that point. And at the bottom of the hill, the road curves to the right when traveling southwest on the trace. There was a vehicle approaching in the opposite direction and was just entering the witness's field of vision as he topped the hill just prior to mile marker 307. The vehicle traveling in the opposite direction had also just topped the hill as well. And as both vehicles came into view of each other on tops of their respective hills, the animal appeared to panic. Both cars traveled down their hills, around the curve, and past each other. The witness slowed to nearly a stop, while the other car appeared to pass by without slowing at all. The animal was initially traveling at a normal speed for a jogger when he first noticed it, but then it suddenly began moving quickly and appeared to be running at about the speed a deer would sprint as both vehicles entered the curve. As it crossed the road from right to left, it lost its balance and tipped, nearly falling down. After catching its balance, it bounded off into the woods. It had its back towards the him until it turned across the road. The closest he came to it was roughly 25 to 30 yards, and it ran between the two cars, and roughly equal distance between the vehicles. He said it was solid black, and was even illuminated by the sun, which was still in the sky at this point. He said the entire observation lasted only a matter of seconds, and his full attention was focused on it for roughly 2. It happened so quickly that he didn't even have the time to say look to his wife, who was also in the car with him. He thinks the sighting took place with the bounds of Tishomingo State Park. He emphasized that he did not pay much attention to it until it panicked and began moving very quickly. He got a side profile of it as it crossed. He said its head did not look human and appeared to be a little raised in the back and appeared to slope towards the front. He described it as very stocky with a muscular build. When it tripped, it swung its arms out to catch its balance. He said the hands appeared to be much larger, proportionally than a human's, and the arms appearing to be longer, proportionally than a normal human arm. While the animal was running along the highway, the arms were up like a human, just like they would be when jogging. The surrounding terrain is steep hills and large boulders. Bear Creek even runs through here. An area adjacent to this location is called the Freedom Hills. It's called that because it was a favored hiding area for escaped slaves prior to the Civil War. It's very possible a large wild beast might be roaming through this area that resembles that of what they call a Bigfoot. My mother and I had taken my young Doberman to the Honey Island swamp to let him run and get some exercise. We had driven to the end of the road where the bridge had collapsed and you could not go any further back by car. The area is just a few miles from the Honey Island exit, off of Interstate 59 in Mississippi. The road was built up, about 8 feet from the ground, since it flooded back there. The area around the road was swampy, having lots of trees. The ground was covered in leaves, since it was fall. We had been there about 10 minutes, and my dog had pretty much been staying on the road as he ran around. I went to get something out of the car, and when I began walking back to where my mother was on the road, she was looking out into the wooded area at something. She pointed out what appeared to be something dark beside a large cypress tree. We could not make out a head, but it appeared to be gray and black, covered in fur, and was actually a torso. Whatever we were looking at was large. It stood above some bushes, and the top part was behind the branches of the tree. It had to have been well over 6 feet tall, since the bushes were at least 3 feet tall. It definitely was not another tree, because the texture was so different, and the big tree next to it looked different. It was approximately 1 p.m. The sun was bright. The light was dappled through the tree cover, but we could see that it was shining off of what appeared to be hair, or something with a wiry, hairy texture. It even seemed to shift back and forth, as if you were to shift your weight from one leg to another. And if I had to guess, it was probably 50 to 75 feet away from us. We could not get a real good look at it. We did not hear or smell anything, and my dog did not seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. After looking at it for at least 2 to 3 minutes, we got very uncomfortable. We decided that we would drive a mile or so up past one of the bridges on the way back to the interstate. We put my dog in the car and drove at least a mile up the road before we stopped again to let my dog back out. We had been there approximately 5 minutes when we heard footsteps in the woods. We could hear them getting closer. This time, my dog picked up on the sound and became alert. We could hear it. We could hear it stop, then move forward a few steps a couple of times. We couldn't see anything, but my dog was definitely trying to figure out what he was hearing. We got a little scared, so we loaded up again, and this time drove up to where there were some nature trails and a shooting range, probably at least 2 miles up the road. We got out of the car again, and were not there for 2 minutes when we heard what sounded like something running through the woods toward us. At that point, my dog got so terrified that he ran back to the car and hit the closed door, just trying to get back in. My mother and I ran to the car. All 3 of us got out there as fast as we could. We never saw what was making the noise in the woods, but whatever it was big enough to make a lot of noise, both walking and especially running. After leaving and having major discussion about what had happened, my mother and I got our nerve up to go back to the end of the road later that day. So now it's about 4 p.m., and we wanted to see what we had seen earlier, if it was still there. When we got there, we could not find what we had seen before. We saw what we were pretty sure was the big tree, but we did not see what was by it originally, and we were not brave enough to go down into the wooded area for a closer inspection. We basically left with even more questions than we started out with. We never had a clear view of what we saw, but what we heard definitely scared us. Also, before I forget, I once met a girl that told me that her family used to actually camp in the Honey Island swamp, and that something came up one night while they were sitting around the campfire. She said that her dad and uncle scared it off by shooting guns in the air, but not before one of her family members managed to get a couple of pictures of it. She said they weren't very clear, but that you can definitely tell there was something there. She said that they had sent them to LSU for them to review. I do not know her name. I only met her once. She told me about this at least 5 years before even my experience took place. I had went and hung a stand on a tree the day before hunting deer in an area north of Sardis Lake on public land. I knew I was the only person in there because the trails hadn't been used for some time. I rode in about 2 miles and then walked roughly 300 yards to where I had hung my climber. It was just about daybreak. I was 20 or so feet up a pine tree when I heard what sounded like somebody beating a large stick against a tree. A ways away, I spotted some movement in the area. It's where the sound came from. Whatever it was very brown and tall. My first thinking was it was a bear. So, using my binoculars, it was about 200 yards from me and dawn. So I pulled up my rifle to look through the scope, hoping I could see it better. It wasn't a bear. It did not have ears on top of its head, and its face was flat. It was at least 8 feet tall and stood just like a man. I noticed the skin was a grayish green and the hair was thin. It was so startled, I stood up. It turned toward my direction and knew I was there. It leaned its head back as if it were smelling the air, then took off. It moved 40 or so yards in a few seconds and was gone. I was shaking badly, climbed straight down. I could not believe what I had seen, so I started walking in the direction that I had seen it. I walked over to a hill where it had slid and left a track. It was human-looking, the foot track. This scared me because I was trying to tell myself it was just a bear. Then, a sound came from the woods that sounded just like a whoop. I hurried back, got my stand, and left those woods. That has been 6 years ago now. Every time I told anybody my story, they made fun of me. So I've been reserved about letting anybody know. But recently, a friend of mine had an encounter he does not want to let anybody know about. He thinks people will think he's crazy. So I found the BFRO, and amazed by how many people have seen the same things I have. When I was 8 or 9 years old, my sister, some friends and I were swimming in a small watering hole, more like a wide spot in a creek, behind the military housing, probably 400 yards into the woods. I wasn't swimming. I was sitting down at the side of the water hole with my feet in the water, but kind of drawn up beside me, and my sister was sitting between my legs in the water. We were all just playing around, being pretty loud, and I don't know if I had heard something. I caught some movement out of the corner of my eye. My attention was drawn to a large bush on the other side of the swimming hole. I sat there, staring at this bush for a good 30 to 40 seconds, maybe a full minute, before I realized what it was that I was seeing. There was a face looking at me from between and behind some branches. It was very flat, very big, and dark brown, almost black. The eyes were black. I thought at the time the eyes were looking at me with curiosity or amusement. It did not look evil, menacing, or, well, you know. I don't remember a mouth or nose. I remember the hands being huge, gigantic, the size of baseball mittens. It seemed like I was looking at it for longer than more just minutes, but it could not have been that long. And all of a sudden, I was just terrified. I picked up my sister and screaming, ran out of there. Everybody just followed me out. I was the only one who saw it. My friends wanted to know why I was so scared. I told them it was Old Man Walker, which, by the way, is a hermit who supposedly lived way back in the woods and would even shoot at you if he saw you. They were okay with that. I didn't want to believe what I saw, but it definitely was not human, and it was not an old man. I found it very comforting to know I was not the only one to have ever seen something so frightening. Thinking about my encounter, I was in no way threatened, and I don't know why I was so frightened, but I still wake up to this day with nightmares. That face was scary. Back in 2011, all the way up until 2014, I used to work as a 911 phone operator, and while I handled many disturbing phone calls, everything from emergencies to potential suicide, and even worse, everything you can imagine, there was always one that stuck out to me. For the sake of safety, I won't be mentioning the name of the county that I worked for, but I will say that it was in Southern California, in a rather large populated city you probably know about. That's all I'll say about that. The phone call in question was picked up around 12:32 a.m. by a woman who sounded to be around in her 50s. She was complaining that a large, upright, lizard-like person was trying to break into her house. I had sent dispatch to go check it out, but before that even happened, she ended up hanging up on me. And before she ended up hanging up, I heard glass breaking in the background and her screaming. And before that, she was claiming it was trying to get in. When I'd asked her to describe to me the person, she kept saying, "This isn't a person in a costume. This is something from hell." After this thing or person broke into the house, and you could hear the glass shatter, she screamed, and I lost the signal. I got in contact with the officer who arrived at the scene. The lady was missing, and there was a weird green-blue substance all over the side of her wall where the broken window was, leading out behind her house, and then just suddenly vanished. Is it possible that whoever or whatever this was had kidnapped her and taken her? But where? It's something that still haunts me, even as an individual who wasn't even actively on the case. I'm sorry for my story being so short, but that's all the details I have, and I thought it fit well within your realm of storytelling. Take care. After being recently divorced, me and my dog found a nice little place to stay with a beautiful backyard and a nice little creek running behind it, with some woods and swamp beyond that. The house itself is a pretty small place, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, maybe 1,200 square feet at best. It doesn't provide a lot, but it's more than enough for me and my dog. I wouldn't exactly say I live out in the country, but I don't also live in a little suburban neighborhood either. I'm kind of tucked away, not too far from town, but just perfect. You know, the Goldilocks zone. Besides the strange things going on around here, it's actually a pretty beautiful place to live. I get all 4 seasons. The weather and the temperature is pretty moderate, at least what I'm used to. And my favorite part of all, it's quiet. Now that I cleared up all the necessary background info, let's get to the weird stuff that's been happening around here. Like I just mentioned to you, since getting divorced back in September of 2020, I ended up moving into this place right around Halloween of 2020. And weird things have been happening outside of the house ever since. Weird noises, strange sounds. Sometimes I could hear this weird water dripping noise, like a large drain dripping water outside my house. Loud, squishy sounding footprints right outside my house, like something weighing 800 or 900 pounds, walking through thick, dense mud. Except there is no mud around my house. It's all just dirt and grass. But the scariest thing that happened was back in January. I had woken up right around midnight to go let my dog out. As I go towards the back door, and I let him out, he begins kind of freaking out, acting weird, definitely not normal. But he's still going out, which I'm not sure what that was about. I just thought he was being dumb, and me being half asleep did not help either. He began whimpering more and more as he slowly paced towards the creek, which is maybe 40 or 50 feet away from my back sliding door. Then, I heard the weirdest, loudest groan I'd ever heard. Immediately, it reminded me of something you'd hear from a large alligator or crocodile, that same low groan that they make. And just in that moment, this large shadow rises up from the creek that had to have been easily 8 or 9 feet tall, incredibly large. And that's, to my horror, when I see it reach out for my dog. My dog starts going crazy, barking, going hysterical, which, again, is way out of his character. He's a very docile dog, and without hesitation, I reach down by the door, grab my .22, which I keep loaded at all times, since it's just me. And even though there are really no intruders, this was one exception where I needed to use it. I pick up my .22, take the safety off, and I fire 2 shots at this thing. I understand from you reading this, you might think I'm crazy, just firing at some unknown person or creature that I don't know what it is. But I'm here to tell you that based off the lighting, and based off the shadow that I saw, there was no way that this was a person, or somebody in a costume. This looked like some sort of human dinosaur alligator thing. It was incredibly large, thick, wide, tall, menacing, and terrifying, and had glowing yellow orangey eyes. But in the moment of all this happening, I wasn't thinking those thoughts. I wasn't sitting there wondering what this was. I simply just reacted to the situation. That something was going after my dog. So after firing 2 shots at this thing, which was only a measly .22, it didn't even seem like it even really reacted to it. And I know I hit it, because it stayed stationary, did not even move. It didn't even act like it flinched, and I know I hit it dead on. But as soon as I fired twice, it retracted its arm, which was almost like a slithering motion, like a snake, even though its arm was incredibly long, with long dangly claws. It then turned its entire body and head right towards me. I have never in my life, besides that moment, felt like literally pooping my pants out of fear. My dog comes running back toward me, full speed, whimpering, freaked out. So I slam the sliding glass door, lock it, close the blinds, while this thing begins to slowly pull its way and clamber out of the creek in my yard, slowly making its way towards my house. So I quickly make sure the blinds are closed, keep my .22 near me, pull my dog over to the living room, which is right next to where the sliding glass door is, and I call the police immediately. Let them know I have an intruder. So I sat there with my dog, quiet, waiting. An officer showed up within 10 minutes. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. He even went and checked out back for me. Nothing. No tracks, no sign of anything disruptive. Even out by the creek. Said he wasn't sure what I saw, or who I saw, but they must be gone now. Said he'll stick around for another hour, just to make sure everything is at peace, and the person doesn't return. He did, and then eventually drove away. Told me to let him know that if anything goes wrong, be sure to give him another call. Well, the next day, I went onto a local Facebook group and reached out to a local Bigfoot investigator. I don't believe in Bigfoot, but I have no idea what it was I was dealing with. Some unknown animal that I had never seen, and I figure if anything, this person might have answers. Him and I exchanged phone numbers, and we chatted on the phone for a little while, when later that afternoon, he came over to investigate himself. I told him my experience, and he initially thought it was a Bigfoot that I was dealing with. Even though I didn't believe, after taking me a bit back further into the woods beyond the creek, where it's a little more swampy, we found a couple of footprints, or what we believed to be footprints, that looked almost like a large lizard. I didn't even know what I was looking at, but he seemed to be very freaked out. Wouldn't tell me what they were, and told me he's leaving immediately, that what I'm dealing with is far worse than any Bigfoot. I wasn't even sure what he meant by that, but he seemed very panicked, very scared. After leaving, I just left it to me and my dog being on our own, and that we'll just have to handle the situation ourselves. The next few nights were calm, and nothing came of it. But then, about a week later, we heard the noise. He just thought it was some sort of demon.
Hi, everybody. How is it going? Well, thank you much for today. I ran out of time faster than I thought. It sucks. But I'll probably be doing another live show later on today around 3. Join me if you're around. If not, then check out my downloads. Check out my website. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me. Today was fun. Linky?
Everybody have a good day, man. And, man, I guess I'm going to say it. And to no avail, another show prevails.